Okay, welcome, Brian. This is, I know we talked about this previously, but this is a bit of an experiment for us. First interview on the Analytic Mind podcast. So I think to kick things off, it would be great to get to know, get the listeners an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. What you currently do, how you're working with Power BI and just data initiatives in general within your role, and anything else that you think would be really relevant to our discussion today.
Well, Sam, thanks for having me. I'm really anxious to give this a go. And right now I currently am on a detail with the federal government to serve as our lead for implementing Power Platform within our program. And it's something we've really just started doing within the last couple of years. It started with an initiative where we needed a financial system that would meet generally accepted accounting principle practices. And we looked around at a lot of options. We actually consulted with Microsoft, and they came back, and of all the options we looked at, came to a consensus that Power Platform, particularly Dynamics and Power BI, would be the best solution. And that was at a time when I'd really never heard of either one. And so I figured as project manager for that I might as well really dive in and get to know the programs and understand what I was managing. And so, I really just kind of hit the internet and immediately fell into the enterprise DNA content and started binging that at night and on weekends and getting up to speed, and really just got completely hooked on Power BI. It fell right in with my background. So just in brief, I've always kind of had a data orientation, even from the time I was a little kid. I remember studying football and basketball statistics, just from the youngest age on. And when I went to college, really just got enamored with economics, and particularly with what we would now call data science, which didn't exist at the time. But I remember taking my first econometrics course, and it's burned into my memory that it's 30 years ago, but the professor on the first day wrote DGP up on the board and said, this is data generating process, and that everything you see in the world is governed by a data generating process, whether that's finance or politics or sports or interpersonal interactions. Data generating process underlies all that. And he said, the tools I'm going to show you and give you in this course are going to let you see that process behind all these interactions. And from that point, I was just hooked. That's what I studied. It's what I studied undergrad. It's what I studied in graduate school. And, really have kind of focused on my entire career of kind of looking at data and seeing what underlies that and how that knowledge can be used, particularly with my career in the public sector, to improve government processes. So,
right. That's great.
Long answer to a short question.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's great. Even though I've known you for a while, it's great to learn some of these new things too. There's a little bit that I think we can unpack there, and a couple of thoughts that come to my mind. It's so interesting that you mention the way that you can sort of perceive data or look at data. And I imagine back, 30 years ago, it was hard for a lot of people to imagine that. But I think with some of the new tools that have really come on stream in the last 5 years or so, it's so much, you can almost look at anything and think, okay, it's basically all about data. It's all about analyzing the data that is coming out of, this particular scenario. A big one that I myself had experience in is I used to work in the finance area quite heavily, in sort of markets and currency, etc. And when you really get into it, it's just all about data. It's all about data, and that's why I was it was quite an easy step for me to step, to go out of, to move out of that world and set up Enterprise DNA, a number of years ago now, because I thought, well, the whole world is slowly moving to this data place, right? Everyone, where it's all about, if you want to add a lot of value in any aspect of business, so much of it now comes down to data, and that sort of insight 30 years ago, has really become far more prevalent. I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny thinking back, that when I remember doing research and, writing my thesis, that, you'd send away for tapes of data and you'd have to mount it on a mainframe, and it became, a big deal to analyze even what we would consider, a relatively small data set now.
Yeah.
And now just being able to pull that instantly off the web and, analyze it on your desktop, it was interesting for me because I spent about the first 10 years of my career just doing analytics, and then kind of moved into management for the next 15 years and really got away from the day-to-day analytics. And then, recently with the Power Platform work, came back to it. And it was like, kind of suddenly waking up in a different era and, seeing how powerful these tools had become and how accessible they were, and things that, in the past would have been really difficult to do and really required a tremendous amount of specialized expertise and computing power. And what you could do now, just, with the free desktop client right on your PC, just was remarkable.
Yeah. I think we think our thoughts totally align around that. I actually thought maybe we give the listeners a bit of background about how we sort of got connected, and a lot of that it's really sort of stemmed from your efforts in the Power, initially sort of in the Enterprise DNA forum, and with all of our members, and then very quickly becoming one of our experts, and just contributing a huge amount to what we've been doing, with the Enterprise DNA and the community that we're building. So, and I remember that, that's how we initially got connected, and then, hopefully in the future we can make that even more official, we're hoping. So definitely, I think the listeners will get to know you a lot better over time, is what I suspect.
Yeah, the forum has just been kind of remarkable opportunity, for me as a learning experience. Just, that it was my first real entree into, kind of the Power BI community, that I remember working on my first project and, working primarily off your excellent YouTube content, and then just getting stuck and just getting to a point I just had a measure I couldn't get to work. And so I posted it on the forum. And this was back in the day when I think you were answering pretty much all the forum questions. And so I still go back to that post occasionally. It's still up on the forum, the first one that I posted, and you provided a great solution that really served as the cornerstone of a report that I still use, pretty much every day, and that is used in my office. And, from that point, I got really engaged in the forum. I was reading it voraciously, and then just kind of ventured into, starting to offer solutions, as I felt able to. And I think, like a lot of people, I was hesitant at first, thinking, I don't know if this is a good solution, or I don't know if this is going to work. And the community was just really welcoming, that some of the solutions I provided were good, some of them were not. But, even the ones that weren't, people would build on and, kind of use in community to get to the answer. And, for me, it's been just a chance to give back to the community, but also a tremendous learning experience, that, just even if you look, this week on the posts, there are some where, we got in with 2 or 3, members and experts, and each built on each other's solutions to get to a better outcome. And, it's as much a learning experience for me as it is for, the people posting questions. So it's really a tremendous kind of two-way exchange.
Couldn't agree more. And certainly, the the efforts that you've put into our community has been amazing, and really appreciated. One of the things that does amaze me is the power of a community online. I mean, it's something that is really hard to create, but once you create it, it becomes such an incredible asset. And this is just generally, this is not just enterprise DNA specific, but the power of a community is, you sometimes read about it, but when you're actually in amongst it, you can, it's amazing what the internet and a digital community can create and can become quite quickly and sustainably. So I'm super excited about where we're at, and also just like where things could go with our community. I mean, one thing that sort of pops into my mind, we were able to build on the Enterprise DNA challenge, or the Power BI challenge, on top of our community that we had built up, and that would have never have been possible without the strong asset that we had with the community beforehand. And so it's just exciting what that could evolve, what things could evolve from our community going forward as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's kind of an incredible thing that when you're in it day to day, sometimes you don't take that step back and see that kind of the incredible achievement it is to basically have the ability to tap into expertise of people all around the world, 24/7. That it amazes me, when I look at, you'll have a problem where it'll be, somebody in India, somebody in Australia, somebody in the Netherlands, somebody in London, somebody in Florida, just all contributing and, kind of working together. And, you kind of take a step back from that, and it's kind of a remarkable thing that, not long ago would have kind of been science fiction.
Yeah.
And so,
I've sometimes referred to our community as the global mind of enterprise DNA, which, that is what it is in reality. Yeah,
I think that it's a great characterization. And, you see it on challenges, and really anything that, that kind of draws everybody together, kind of working toward a common problem or a common question. And, it's just fascinating to me to see the diversity of thought in that community, not that community solely, but, that's the one I'm most involved in. And so to see, kind of 10 different people take 10 different approaches to a solution, and, kind of looking at the different analytical approaches people take, the different technical approaches, the way people break down problems differently is just, both incredibly instructive and, just personally kind of endlessly fascinating to me.
Yeah. And also it sort of flows on to, what we're trying to achieve with this particular podcast, is where, through that community, we're really trying to build better analysts. We're trying to improve the analytical minds of those who are participating. And I think that digitally, through that community, you can do that in a big way. And then also, what we're trying to do with this podcast is really touch upon those ideas, in a more sort of audio type fashion, where we could, talk through a variety of different things on data related topics, from, how to think about problems from an analytical perspective, but also more broadly, how to build up a data culture, how to build that up to a more sort of data related, data culture within organizations to get the most out of your data assets. So I think that might be a good segue, where we touch upon more about sort of what your experience is within your own organization, with your, it could be sort of Power BI initiatives or just general data culture initiatives. One of the things that I think would be good to touch on first is, how did you, in terms of you mentioned earlier about the evaluation stage of an analytics tool like Power BI or the Power Platform, how do you think the organization came to a point where they decided this is the tool for us? What was sort of what do you think the sort of thought processes, the decision process was, and also the various considerations that your team and organization had?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something we spent a lot of time on. I think we looked to solutions that were scalable. We've got some, relatively kind of small specific problems. We've got some, kind of very large kind of office-wide, agency-wide problems. We were looking for something, I think, where it wouldn't have to rely on a lot of esoteric custom development, that would be tied to kind of a single person's knowledge. And so, one of the things about, Power Platform is we're an Office 365, Microsoft shop, just for Excel and Word and PowerPoint. And so looking for something that kind of leveraged off that knowledge, and allowed us to, kind of take advantage of what folks were already doing, to build solutions that would be easy for users to implement, and would kind of give a range of flexibility. So if you really just wanted to, kind of run the out of the box report and have that answer the questions, that's great. And then recognizing that we've also got, a lot of really smart folks in a lot of different areas that would have the capability and interest to do their own analyses. And so something that would give them the flexibility to do that as well. And, the thing somebody mentioned the term last week to me, Excel debt service, and that being one of the real challenges in data culture these days. And I think it's a great way of thinking about it. And it really captures a lot of what our struggle has been over the years, which is that if you have tools that don't meet people's needs, whether it be financial, scientific, economic, smart people are going to basically build things on their own to do their jobs well. And the tool that everybody has on their desk to do that is Excel. And so what we found, and what I think a lot of organizations find, is that if the tools aren't meeting the needs, then people will kind of go and build their own solutions in Excel. And so all of a sudden you've got this proliferation of Excel worksheets and Google Sheets and Smart Sheets and, all these things that people have built that aren't really coordinated, don't really talk to each other. You've got data fragmented all over the organization. And so what we've been really trying to do with Power BI and Power Platform is to kind of pull all that together, not in terms of, kind of taking control away from the individual, but giving it to the users in a way that makes the data they need accessible, that it breaks down the silos. So instead of everybody having, bits and pieces of data on their local drive, you've got that synthesized together in a thoughtful way, accessible by people, queryable. Mm-hmm. And, Power BI really, in looking at the alternatives, was something that gave us that capability, kind of end to end, that it really has struck me as we've rolled out solutions that with just a little bit of training, users just instinctively know how to use a good Power BI report.
Right.
We get very little support requests. People are able to pull out of that what they need. And it's developed a good feedback loop as well, where instead of going off and, generating their own Excel sheets, they'll come back to us and say, hey, this is great, but it would be even better if it could do X. Mm-hmm. And so, we then modify the report or create a new report to do that. And it's really kind of pulled that data culture together in a way that we hadn't seen prior. And we're just kind of getting started with that. Mm-hmm. But I think, kind of getting away from the individual Excel debt service is a big part of that.
Right. Are you still a believer in the self-service structure that you could apply Power BI to, or have you decided to take a bit more of the development side of things, especially to a centralized team, and then having only minor adjustments happening at the self-service level?
It's a great question. I don't think we're far enough along in the implementation to know exactly how that's going to shake out.
Yep.
At this point, I would say it's fairly highly centralized, that we've got only a relatively small number of us who know how to develop reports and know how to manage data within that platform.
Mm-hmm.
But we're branching out and getting more people up to speed on that, and so at this point it's fairly centralized, but not in a way I think that feels restrictive to people. In a way I think it feels kind of freeing, that they don't have to maintain a lot of these separate tools, or won't if we get to the point where the platform is providing them what they need. So it's a really good question, and I've been wrestling with it from the standpoint of, particularly as the tool itself has evolved and things like perspectives have been incorporated. I see that as potentially a really good center point on which to kind of pivot centralization versus self-service. So you can create reports and analyses that are fairly centralized, but then still give a lot of flexibility to the user to customize. And I think that eventually that's going to be the right balance point for us.
Yeah, because it's one of the huge promises of not only Power BI, but a lot of the other tools that are out there, the Tableaus, the ClickViews, etc., is this self-service aspect, and it's marketed quite hard from these vendors. But I think that just leaving everyone to their own devices in a self-service way does obviously throw up a lot of dangers, and I think we've probably seen that. Well, I personally have seen it quite a lot in some of the partnerships that we have with some organizations. So I definitely think that there's a huge, the self-service aspect has a huge part to play in the buy-in and the sort of buzz that you can build around these new tools, these new set of tools. And I think you do want to leave room for those business users on the front lines who know their data really well to do some sort of work inside of Power BI. But I still am a believer. Well, my view has certainly evolved over time that you need a strong central sort of authority to just make sure that there is the right planning being done around things like data access and consistency around report building, best practice implementation, just general governance. I think you need to have quite a bit of planning and maintenance around those sort of things as well. And it sounds to me like you're sort of on your way, to building out that sort of more centralized operation to then unleash the tool more widely, more broadly across business users or front office users.
Yeah, I think that's true. And particularly, your point about governance is extremely well taken. That it's been something we've been wrestling with for a while, and I think we're finally kind of settling into a pretty good framework where we've got all the different players at the table coming to consensus on governance practices, even down to the level of individual settings in the Power BI administration in the service, making sure that we're aligned on that, and that nobody's gonna make a change that's gonna break other people's reports. But from the self-service standpoint, one thing I've really seen huge benefit on is kind of the beginning edge of really eliminating the repetitive processes that just suck up so much time. And so, for example, our finance team, runs these monthly reports, and right now they're largely, kind of running off a centralized financial system, but then a lot of the data manipulation is being done in Excel, and it's done every month. It's fairly manual process. And, we're really excited about the potential for automating almost all of that. Just having it pull the data in from the central system, basically report out, and not just in a, kind of pivot table way, but, really taking advantage of the visualization and, analytic and dynamic capabilities of Power BI. And so being able to provide those reports in an automated way to people, not monthly, but, daily, so that we're running those, on scheduled refresh at night, and managers can just come in, open their computer in the morning, and have the newest data available to them without having to go to the finance team, have them run a separate report. And then it frees up those teams to really do the creative analytical thinking and kind of driving the organization forward, rather than just running repetitive reports over and over again. So, I see that it's kind of creating that space within the organization for some real innovation and creativity.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, I remember a number of years ago when Power BI first came out, I looked at it and I thought, this is a new paradigm in terms of what you can achieve. I remember almost like half an hour to an hour into creating my first report inside of Power BI. And then when it was released in its newest version, I thought, wow, this is just something new. This is going to make such a huge difference to all sort of data management, data analysis, data distribution. It's just a totally new paradigm. And it seems like what you described just then was, you're now you've been able to sort of showcase this to, business users who might have been buried in PDF documents and Excel spreadsheets historically. You're able to now show them, look at what we can achieve now. It's just, so much. It's 10 times better than what you probably have been used to. My question that I wanted to go to from that is, how long has it been from where you obviously decided and evaluated that Power BI and the Power Platform is right for you? How long do you think it took for others to realize that, this can actually make a huge difference? Like, how long has that journey been? Was it easy to get buy-in? Because I think that's what a lot of like individuals within organizations who, are the Power BI users, who are the analysts, they know this. We all preaching to the converted, but it's about what are your experiences around getting senior level managers, executives to completely buy into, doesn't have to be Power BI, but just, an analytics tool that is going to increase the productivity and output around data and analysis. How do you make that happen? And, you can use your own experiences to sort of answer that.
Wow, that's a big question to unpack. I think I've been really fortunate in my own experience in that the managers that I report to and basically have to sell these concepts to, by and large, are scientists and analysts, by training. And so, they kind of quickly got the concept of what we were trying to do. I think there's always in a large organization, we were the first ones to really push the Power Platform. And so, particularly from the IT side, you've got to convince folks that it meets security requirements, that it's not going to present a risk, that it's really got significant benefit beyond the tools that you've already got, since anytime you introduce a new tool, there's going to be training required, for the people who support it and the people who implement it. So it's been a process of basically working with all the stakeholders and really understanding in depth their concerns, and then trying to address those that, kind of on the level of their concerns. But I will say, that in some ways the approach kind of sells itself that when you see, I'm always looking forward to the demos that I do of people who've never seen Power BI before. And, even a fairly basic Power BI report just looks miraculous to somebody who is basically spent, the last years buried in Excel and other tools like that. Just the things you can do at the user level and the insights you can extract. Every time I've demoed these, people are just floored by what it can do relative to the tools that they're used to. So
yeah,
in a lot of ways that makes it easy, in that it just creates a curiosity and a willingness to have the discussion. For me, I think one of the biggest hurdles has been, okay, this is great, but who else can do this? I think people don't want to get into a situation where, okay, that, and I'm not saying specifically about my development skills, because, it's just anybody who kind of brings something new. The question is, how transferable is this knowledge? Is this something is this something a lot of people know? And I think one of the things that's been really helpful is, as we've brought more people in the team up to speed on, Power BI development, just showing that, there's not a trivial learning curve, but certainly a manageable learning curve. And that, we've got people on the IT team, we've got people on the finance team, kind of all throughout the organization in different disciplines that are getting good at this. And I think that in and of itself is a huge selling point, that it's not something that, in order to make changes on or to build new reports, you're going to have to go out and contract an expert developer. That, much of the development can be done in-house. And that's been, I think once we've shown that, I think that's been a big, big selling point to the stakeholders that we've been trying to convince on this.
Yeah. Microsoft says it a lot, and I hesitate to use buzzwords, but they always like to describe it as democratizing analytics or advanced analytics, but that's in reality what they have done with the Power BI platform. Is you can do things in Power BI in a tool that costs you hardly anything and basically is free if you want it to be. You can do things that probably cost you tens of thousands of dollars to achieve, only 5 years ago. And if you can, from what I've seen, if you can showcase that, and as you say, it's not that difficult, because even a simple Power BI report is so much better than what everyone's used to. If you can even just showcase that, that is generally how you can get buy-in quite quickly. I find is just prototype. Just do some initial prototyping, get that in front of users, and then that can get the ball rolling pretty quickly, because if business users see the value, then that sort of, those requirements can flow up to the other support teams and support functions to sort of make it happen. Make sure that the data is available. Make sure that the security is all set up correctly. That can really, I have seen push that along a lot quicker.
Well, I think your point about kind of democratizing this, I've seen this in the expert team that we have, in that among that expert team, there's not one software developer. We've got a couple of chartered financial accountants, we've got an engineer, we've got some people in manufacturing, myself as an economist, we've got a logistics specialist. And it's fascinating to me that, and these folks are just tremendously skilled developers. And so, the fact that, your business and analytic and substantive background is really the key in this, and that Power BI is learnable by anybody with a good analytics background, that it's not limited to the developers. And in fact, as I said, we don't have a single developer among us. And I think that is is a huge advantage in an organization where, you can really have, in coordination with the IT team, and certainly they play an important role in this, but you can really have the people with the business knowledge kind of driving the tool development process.
Yeah.
And really kind of making it responsive to the needs of those business users. And I think that's a pretty unique aspect of it, and one that I see as a huge advantage.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more with you there. One of the other things I wanted to maybe touch upon is, and would be of real value is, especially in your sort of industry, or where you're sort of more in government within the US, is, what are some of the struggles that you have had, or some of the things that have slowed you down to really using Power BI as a way to embed more of a data culture around your team and your wider organization? But that's a tough one, because it's been, over the last year and a half that we've been doing this. There have definitely been some challenges, and yeah. Are they technical? Are they technical? Are they cultural? Are they bureaucratic? Are they individual resourcing?
I think part of it is, it kind of goes back to my last point, which is it's kind of the flip side of that one, in that because it's really the business users driving this, and we're not software developers, and so it's been a learning process for me in the project management of what it takes to develop a pretty large scale complex application. Certainly, kind of the smaller project reports we've done, those have gone relatively smoothly and easily. But when you're talking about a big complex project that draws large data from a wide array of sources, and you've got governance across multiple components of the agency, that kind of learning all the nooks and crannies behind that as a business user, I think has been a challenge for us. And that I think if we, and this is where kind of bringing in the outside expertise has really been valuable, in really helping us get to the finish line of what it takes to build a large scale app and roll that out. And kind of bringing in some of the UX experts in terms of, how do you can build what you think your users need, but how do you know that really is what they need? And so there are some really good techniques that we've learned about how to involve your users right from the get-go. And I think that's been a big lesson learned for us, in that I think early on we thought we knew what they needed. And as we move into the second phase of this, we're doing a lot of focus groups. We're doing a lot of interaction with the users to really understand what are they doing now? What are the challenges with what they're doing now? What do they want to see? What are some of the things that are working well? I think whenever you come in with a new tool, you want to be careful not to break the things that are working well. And so kind of understanding where the strengths are as well as the weaknesses. I think that's probably been one of the biggest lessons and challenges, is just kind of dealing with the scope of something like that, and really how to best bring a diverse array of users into the process.
So have you engaged external parties to help with that, or is this what you've been managing within your own team?
We have engaged externally to bring in experts on that, because recognizing that the limits of what we know, and also wanting to really leverage the experience of folks who've done this for years, and so they can kind of short circuit us from making some of the mistakes that you gain from experience. We kind of try to use their experience and avoid some of those dead ends.
Right. Is a lot of that sort of in the database side, like in the more infrastructure side, just getting that set up correctly across, the variety of different data sets that stem from different business areas or areas within the org?
Yeah. And it's really interesting how it's kind of in the forum, we always talk about, before you attribute something to a DAX problem, make sure that your data model is in good shape.
Yep.
And that was basically our challenge at a very large scale. We spent weeks in terms of structuring and polishing that data model. That it started out as, just one of those spaghetti diagrams. And, we really spent a lot of time with the consultants and with our internal experts to really put together a powerful data model that would support the analyses we wanted to do. I think, having a clear picture of the questions you want to answer from the outset. And that's where our management team really did a good job for us in terms of said, this is what we want the system to answer. This is when you come to us with a product, this is how we're going to judge whether it's good or not, whether it can answer these questions in a really simple and effective way. Mm-hmm. And kind of that really helped guide the data modeling effort to say, okay, let's build a model that answers those questions, but also provides us flexibility for the future for the types of questions we think people are going to want to answer once they see what the system can do. Mm-hmm. And so we really spent, what seemed at the time like an inordinate amount of time in data modeling. And I think there was a period when folks were worried that it seemed like we weren't making a lot of progress. But in retrospect, I think that was the best time we spent, because everything, once we got that data model working smoothly, the report development and the subsequent work just fell into place in a really, really beautiful way.
Right. So you believe that there's a lot of value in, before you just start jumping into building out your reports and getting developers to start prototyping. There's a lot of value in actually just first going out to the business, collecting just even some simple requirements around what insights they want to see. Is a good strategy, and I can imagine that's a good strategy. But it's a good sort of best practice around implementation. But also, that sort of works well from a cultural point of view as well, where you're really being inclusive. You're not just putting something in front of the end user. You're actually saying, "Hey, this is a collaborative effort."
Yeah, and it speaks to a mistake I made early on, which is early on in talking to those stakeholders, I asked the question of what do you want? What reports do you want out of the system? And in retrospect, that really didn't work well, because for folks who are used to Excel and who really haven't worked in this kind of platform before, you're asking them a question they don't really have the experience to answer. And so, in terms of asking, the analogy I've given sometimes is it's like asking somebody in the 1800s, how do they want their private jet configured? And they've just got no foundation on which to answer that question. So for somebody who is, spent years looking at Excel reports, to ask them, what do you want an advanced visualization report to look like? They don't know. So the answer that comes back is, it kind of looks like a pivot table. And so what we've since done is really focused not on what do you want the report to look like, but what are the questions you want answered? And we'll take a crack once we know what questions you want to derive from the data. We'll take a crack at what the report looks like, and then work with you interactively to polish that and modify it to your needs. But rather than kind of the end product and the end point of discussion being the report, it's really the analytical questions, and getting a deep understanding of that, then going into the data modeling and not even touching prototypes and reports and starting to write DAX or, Power Query. Until that point, is something I really take as kind of a fundamental principle now.
Great. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. It's good to get some insights from in the trenches, really. So I can it's great. I'm certainly learning a little bit, learning a lot here too. I think we're going for a while now, so I want to be able to fit in some of these final questions that I've got. What do you think is where do you feel you can get your implementation to within your organization? I mean, what's the sort of grand vision 3 to 5 years out? I mean, what sort of difference do you think, or how different do you think things will look at that point in time to where they are right now?
Yeah, we've started to really think about that, and I think it's come as we've developed a better understanding of the service. That's probably the last component for me that I've gotten to, that I kind of focused on report development in the desktop, and in really now learning all the ins and outs of the services, and data flows and shared data sets, and certified content, and things we can do to share and leverage data resources across the organization. So again, instead of each group then developing Power BI reports and analyses off their own data sets, whether we can then kind of put through things like data flows authoritative data sources up in the cloud that we can then all commonly build off of, and avoid a lot of the inefficiency that comes from each group kind of having to derive that same group of base data sets on which we're building financial information or business information. That's a big part of where I see things going. And then really kind of expanding out the circle of of analysis and development, as I've talked about. That's a big part of it. And then part of it is just kind of the unknown. That one of the things I love about Power BI is kind of every month is Christmas. That you get a new release. You never know what's going to be in that. You never know exactly the direction that Microsoft is going to take this. And so, some months you open the box and see things that you weren't expecting that, have huge implications. As I see, perspectives, I think is one that I look at that way. The external tools menu, in terms of the way now we can link into other analytical tools. I see that taking things potentially in a different direction. And so, kind of predicting, given that 2 years ago, I didn't even know this platform existed, projecting out at any distance what it's going to look like in, 2 more years. I just realized anything I say is probably going to, in retrospect, come back and sound silly 2 years from now.
I know that the rapid improvement that Microsoft, this rapid improvement program that they've been on has been, quite phenomenal. Even Power BI was very transformational when it was sort of re-released 4 or 5 years ago. But just some of the additions that they've made, in all aspects, from the querying side, the development side, the distribution side, the online service that you've touched upon, it has been just amazing. They've in my view, they've started with an amazing tool and made it incredible. So it is, it's amazing the journey they've been on. What do you think at an I know you're saying it's hard to forecast, but can you think at a more individual level, like in a couple of years' time, based on your internal efforts from an individual level, what sort of changes do you think users out there who have access to the online service, what sort of experience do you think or impact will Power BI and your implementation efforts have on their day-to-day activities?
Well, a lot of it gets to, I think it's going to fundamentally change the kind of the makeup of what people do during their day. That, right now, as I mentioned, that all of us on the business side, have these time-consuming repetitive tasks that take up a significant chunk of time. And whether that's, on the HR side or, in things like grants and agreements or, budget and finance, and the ability to, on the budget and finance side, the ability to run at your desktop in 15 seconds, something that would have taken, a team of 2 or 3 people, half a day to run manually. The time savings in that is enormous. And so, in thinking about kind of what then you can have people do with their time, and the innovation and, kind of refocusing of effort, and kind of really better taking advantage of the expertise and skill set that you have in-house, and not having, high level people or any level people, just kind of mindlessly cranking reports, opens up tremendous possibilities, I think, for moving the organization forward. And so, we've already seen kind of the ability of the organization to, take on projects that we probably wouldn't have been able to take on if we were spending a huge chunk of time just kind of servicing those, those regular reports. And, that's something we're just starting to see the tip of the iceberg on. But, as this kind of proliferates, I see that, not just for our office, but just, kind of industry wide and agency wide, that just in the same way. I mean, this is dating myself, but I remember, my dad was a corporate manager for years in the pharmaceutical industry. And I remember as a kid, him sitting around budget time at the dining room table with graph paper, doing budgets, doing divisional budgets. And he'd have these huge sheets of graph paper, that would be there. And I remember when, the first spreadsheets came out, and him just, it was like, caveman seeing fire for the first time. And, him just seeing kind of how that was going to totally change things. And it's just interesting 30 years later to have that same experience as I kind of look at Power BI, and just really from the initial glance just said, this is going to change the way the world works.
Certainly. Yeah, certainly a big impact on business for sure. Well, one of the other ways that I see it as well, and I've actually seen this within organizations that we've worked with in the past, is historic reporting and analysis. It's always been very backward looking, and obviously takes a while to process. So it can get outdated very quickly. But certainly with the automation capabilities and also the time that you have to explore more forward-looking analysis, that I feel opens up a new paradigm as well for what can be done within organizations. And I sort of see small green shoots of that happening, and I'm sure that's going to grow exponentially as everyone realizes they've got so much more time to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's both the time and also the availability of tools. There was a really interesting. I mean, I know you've seen it, but in the last challenge, one of the entrants, Brad Smith, took it was a challenge based on a JIRA data set and applied some remarkable machine learning techniques to that. And the way in which those sorts of techniques are now available to people in ways that they never would have been, or that you would have needed, advanced data science degree and, some really, really high powered computing resources to do that kind of work. The way it's bringing that down again to the user level. And there's still, there's still a fair amount of knowledge you have to apply that properly. But that threshold is far below what it was, even a few years ago. And,
Yeah.
I see that as the tool develops and people's understanding of how to use these tools advances, kind of bringing that into the mix in a way that it's really never been before. And the sophistication of analyses. And it's remarkable, just we've done 8 challenges. And I think if you look back at challenge 1 to challenge 8, the level of sophistication in the entrance is astonishing. And this is only since June, I think, was the first challenge. And so in 5 months, the evolution of how people are using this tool and custom visuals that they're building on their own, and machine learning and statistics and Python and all the different things they're bringing into the tool is just incredible in just basically a summer and part of the fall. And I think about if you extend that out 2 years, who knows what those entries are going to look like in 2 years. It's exciting to think about.
Well, the challenge that we run at Enterprise DNA is, probably I'm a bit biased, but I think we're seeing some of the best Power BI development in the world happening on our challenges right now. Just the way that navigation is being, within these reports is being created, some of the creativity. It's just mind blowing, and as you say, it's super exciting as we try and build up the challenge to be much greater than it is today. Where we could eventually get things. The challenge hopefully we need to make it become the leading development inspiration place on the web in the world. We want it to continue to be where everyone can come to and really see what they can achieve with Power BI. And so still early days with where we can take that. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on, just on what you mentioned earlier, it escaped me. I had it before in my mind. What was I going to say? Oh, I was going to say, about that advanced analytics, those advanced analytics topics. Like, this is, I couldn't agree with you more. And the way I look at it is that it's upon us, Enterprise DNA, to really be the educators of that. To democratize that the knowledge required for even an Excel user to do machine learning and to do advanced analytics. That's what we need to be doing, and how we need to evolve what content we provide and what education we provide, and as that functionality gets more embedded into Power BI, I want us to be right there, making sure that we're empowering all of our connections to be able to do that sort of analysis. So, this is certainly the direction that I want to go to as well. One thing I think we'll round off with one more question, Brian. How does that sound? Sure. This has actually gone quite quickly for our first guest interview. Sort of been a nice organic conversation, which is exactly what I was hoping for.
Well, I think we can both talk about this stuff all day. It's just it's what we're both passionate about. So this is fun for me.
So what I thought would be a good question to end on, and maybe this could be the question that we end on every episode, is what do you think are some of the activities that individuals can, whether you're an analyst or a business, just a general Excel user, or just you're in business and you want to learn more, get better insights. What are some of the things you think individuals can do to build up their own analytic minds, grow their own analytic capabilities?
I've given this a lot of thought, and I've actually put together a video on 5 ways to improve your DAX toolbox. And the way, the technique that I really talk about in there is something called structured practice. And you certainly have to have a foundation. I think, the video content, provides video content, the blog content provides a great foundation of understanding, but it's not until you start doing it yourself that it really clicks. And there are some really well proven ways in this kind of structured practice discipline. They've shown this for surgeons, for ballet dancers, for athletes, that it works across paramedics. It works across, every discipline, is to really have this structured practice where it's repetitive. It is kind of continually challenging yourself beyond, slightly beyond, not dramatically beyond your existing capabilities. And, for me, I think the two things that have been really instrumental in that have been the forum and the data challenges, but I would say to, to anybody that I think those are great places to start, but really it's to dig in and, get a data set that you really are passionate about, that you have that real intellectual curiosity to understand what's going on, going back to the, the early part of the conversation, to think about that data generating process and really say, if you put on your data analysis glasses, what can you see about that data generating process through these analytical tools and techniques? And by diving into your own data, and doing that on a regular basis and building up, the practice and the skills, that's really, I think, that's the only way to grow. I think kind of teaching from experts is great. And that's what introduces you to new techniques. But, I know, for example, I've watched probably hundreds of hours of your content, and it always looks easy when you do it. And I sit there and I think, okay, that seems pretty straightforward. And then I remember, early on getting in front of the computer myself and going, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. And it's only through, then working through the problem on your own that you build that understanding. It seems so simple when you watch somebody else, but there's no substitute for digging in yourself. And so, I think with regard to the challenges, one of the things I would really encourage people is, it's easy to get intimidated when you see the really cutting edge stuff people are doing, and to think, I can't do that. And I would say you can't do that now, but you'd be surprised with, kind of that structured practice, what you'll find yourself able to do in a relatively short period of time. But it's not even about that. It's not about, kind of being at the top end of that. It's really challenging yourself and kind of growing your own capabilities through that active participation. And whether that's challenges or the forum or, some other avenues that, I think we've been talking about, that's in my mind the way to do it and the way to succeed in this.
Great. Well, I think that is awesome advice to end on. I think that is also a great question to end on as well. A good way to round off a really great discussion, and give some actionable advice, to those out there who are listening, which I'm sure will be probably quite a small number, considering this is our first guest interview on the podcast. But who knows? Maybe the back catalog might get a huge amount of listens in the future. Who knows? This is a great experiment for us, and thanks a lot, Brian, for being our first guest. I think that this could be, again, one of those initiatives that we start at through Enterprise DNA that could eventually evolve into something much bigger in the years to come. I certainly hope so. I'm sure if we get some great traction, you'll be a very regular guest, maybe even a host one day. Who knows?
Sam, thanks. I'm really, really honored to be guest number one. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Time always flies by when you and I chat. So yeah. This is just kind of an extension of those conversations. But I hope folks have gotten something useful out of this, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing the subsequent guests and conversations. So thanks.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Brian. Let's wrap things up, and let's I think we're onto something here. We'll see how we go.
Great.
Okay, take care. See ya.